Who? Thank you for joining. I apologize again for this not being the in-person workshop that we had it all slated out to be. It just seemed like there's this cascade of things working against that workshop as we were trying to make it happen, all the way down to the weekend before the event was supposed to happen. The chef who we had centerpieced as the person who is going to do the big cooking demonstration said, I've got COVID, I can't make it. And that's one of the realities of in-person events these days, to be sure, but we felt like that had been such like a cornerstone of what we'd been advertising, that there was no way to do it without him. And then when we tried to reschedule, everybody's schedules fell apart. So welcome virtually to getting back to in-person events. The irony of that is not lost on me, but I think it's also a great place to do it given where everybody's at today. It's good to see everybody. I'm glad that you can make it for this. And since we are recording, if you need to, feel free to keep your cameras on. I won't be offended if you turn them off. But if you have any questions, enter them in chat as they come up. And then what I'll do is I'll get to the chat as we work our way through because sometimes I kind of get focused on the script and what we're doing here. And other times I'm like, oh, look, I see chat. I am an auctioneer, which means I'm easily distracted by any movement. Let's see, I think I have, yep, here we go, introduction. I'm Greg. I founded Stellar Fundraising Auctions back in 2014. So it's been over 8 years now. Been doing fundraising auctions since 2004. Had a heck of a run doing virtual events for 2020 and 2021. And I have to say that all of the time doing virtual events really strengthened a lot of my core competencies, but also just events core competencies around what it's like to get people back in person, because we learned to do a lot of things virtually that were harder and less effective. And so now that we're getting back to in person, all of these skills that we spent trying to motivate somebody to participate in a virtual event, and then once they're at the virtual event to actually participate is really challenging. Getting somebody to attend an in-person event and participate has become much easier in comparison once you get over the health hurdle, and we'll talk about that. I did a bunch of virtual galas, I did a bunch of in-person events. What we're going to cover today, we'll talk about the state of live events in 2022, because live events are in a really interesting place right now. Talk about auction lots that work, making the fund and need successful. We'll talk a little bit about conducting hybrid events. And then, of course, we'll have a Q&A at the very end, and we'll go from there. So the state of in-person events, like I said, salut. Like I said, live events are in a really interesting place right now. A good percentage of the population is eager and excited to be back in person. And if you talk to AV vendors, you'll find out that they're just booked solid. The sheer amount of live events that is being scheduled right now is pretty staggering. They're not all fundraising events, though. It's really interesting to see that the huge majority of live events that are taking place, it's not the live events that are going that. I mean, there are good fundraising events, but they're just booked solid. People are eager to be back to person. When it comes to live fundraising events, the crowds that really want to be back in person, really want to be back in person. There are still, though, crowds that don't want to be in a crowded room together, especially in the Bay Area. We have always been more cautious about our approach to the pandemic. And so 2022 has been as interesting a year, challenging a year for anyone planning an event as 2021 has been, and more challenging than 2020, because 2020 we knew you have to go virtual. That's your only option. And this year, especially at the beginning of the year, there was this what do we do moment for February and March. Sonoma shut down in February and said no in-person events for the month of February. And now that we're sort of through it, but not, it's an interesting challenge, because you always want to honor the wishes and desires of your population. And when it comes to being concerned about being in person, I think there's a lot of real concern there. Did just a modicum of research. I'm by no means an expert on this, but post-pandemic PTSD is going to be a thing. When I went to see my doctor for my checkup, she said she has young, healthy, clients of hers who have no preconditions, are not at risk health-wise, do not live with anybody at risk health-wise, and are terrified of being in a crowd, are scared to be in a room full of people. And studies have shown that up to 22% of the population is going to have some form of post-pandemic PTSD. And this is based on previous pandemics. This is based on the flu of 1918 and other pandemics since. And so it doesn't mean don't do in-person events, but it does mean that we're going to have to be sensitive to this segment of our population's needs, even as we seemingly ignore them, because for a good chunk of this pandemic, it has been, let's make this as safe and comfortable as possible, right? And we're rapidly moving towards, if you're not comfortable, don't come. And this past weekend, I had 3 events, and one of them was very, very cautious. Masks were required, vaccinations were checked, all that sorts of things. It was the smaller event. It was a hybrid. We can talk more about hybrids later. And it was the least successful of the 3 events. The other 2 events were like, if you don't feel like coming, don't come. But the rest, like, we're doing this event in person. And the crowd that wanted to be there really wanted to be there. Now, I can't talk about the messaging that they had for people who didn't attend, but we can make some guesses as to it. In-person events are raising more money than they did pre-pandemic. If there are any trends to be had, I'd say that we have less attendees than normal. They are way louder than ever before, but they're also more willing to focus when we really challenge them to do so, if we have an emotionally engaging reason for them to focus. And we're raising more money in the live auction and Fund the Need. And again, at the risk of repeating myself, crowds are extremely excited to be together in person. And what this means if you're planning an in-person event is that you need to have a timeline that gives your crowd their opportunities to hang out and chat and network at their tables. It was important pre-pandemic. It's just as important or more important now, because if you don't give them space to blow off a little steam before you start the program, they are going to rebel and talk through everything and not give you any space at all to do your fundraising. It also means that you need to be really conscious of your timeline. I'm sorry for not having this in the PowerPoint, but crowds have an attention span from the moment they arrive to the moment they're done of about 3 hours. And from the moment they sit down to the moment they're done is about 90 minutes. And you can push that. There are exceptions to every rule. There are crowds who have a greater attention span and crowds who have a lesser attention span. But if you figure that from the moment your crowd sits down until the moment they're done is 90 minutes, and you have to give them 15 to 20 minutes to network and hang out at their tables, that means you've got basically 70 minutes from when they sit down to when they're done to get your program in and to get your fundraising in. So it means that you need to, we learned this in virtual, and it's as true now as ever. You need to have a concise, focused timeline that really communicates your message and gets to the fundraising in an efficient, but at the same time respectful manner. What about virtual? What about virtual, you say? Virtual is pretty much done. It's all but finished. I think choosing to do a 100% virtual event, if you are a local organization with a local donor base, choosing to do a 100% virtual event is choosing to raise less money than you would if you were going to be in person. We saw this happen a few times in the spring. In March, we had an organization. They said, we're not really sure. What should we do? I said, I can't make the decision for your donors. That's bigger than my shoulders. That's higher responsibility than my shoulders can bear. You should ask your supporters. So they sent an email to 70 of their biggest bidders and supporters, and 50 of them said, we want to be virtual. Okay, so we listened to them. We did a virtual event in March, and then they didn't show up and didn't spend any money. There were moments in the virtual event where I could feel the money slipping away because it was obvious that we were hindered by the format in which we were working. A few organizations are choosing to do hybrid events, honoring the crowd that wants to stay at home and honoring the people who want to be in person. And we can talk more about them later, but the spoiler alert on that is that they are probably more work than they are worth. I am not seeing hybrid events yield results, and we'll keep a finger on this pulse if we can, but I have yet to see hybrid events financially crush it. I am seeing them serve a different need, which is honoring the needs of their community who doesn't want to be in person, right? So going back to post-pandemic PTSD, if there are major, and not everybody who doesn't want to be in person has PTSD, I'm not trying to say that, but I am saying that people who don't want to be in person have a right to not want to be there. And if they are a major donor, how then do you honor them and make sure that you are feel like their needs are being taken care of, and at the same time doing the best event for you? And we'll talk about hybrid more later. I want to come back to it because it's not the place that I think we need to spend the majority of our time today. Because the exciting news is that auctions really are back, and live auctions, much of us knew, like pre-pandemic, what we knew pre-pandemic is still relevant with a few updates. And when I think about auction lots, I did a lot of, I was trying to come up with a different way to present this because I've been talking about live auction lots as long as I've been doing live auctions. And I really think that it breaks down into two different things when I'm thinking about live auction lots. I'm thinking about the category of an auction lot and the specific type of an auction lot. And the categories that perform best in a live auction are trips. Trips are the foundation. They're the bedrock of every fundraising auction that we do. Dining and entertainment. Dining and entertainment have been popular going back to when I started, and that hasn't changed. Buy-in and count-me-ins. And we'll talk more about them specifically, but they have really, they've been strong for over a decade, but they've really gotten stronger since we're getting back to in-person post-pandemic, and I'll talk about why. Organization-specific lots, sports and concerts, wine, and then at the very last second, I had a brainstorm and I thought, oh, we should also put warm-up lots in there. So we'll talk about warm-up lots, even though they're not on the agenda. So let's say that within each of those, oh, sorry, I'm going to go back. Nope, I'm not. Within each of these categories, there are 4 basic types. There's retail, access, relationship, and community. Those hopefully are self-descriptive, but retail basically means you can buy it off the shelf. Access means that you're getting to do something or have an experience or stay somewhere that you wouldn't normally have access to. Relationship means that you are building a relationship, or we're selling in a relationship with an individual. And then community is something that is very tied to the heart of your organization and the community of your organization, right? And so we can apply these types to each category of auction lots. So we'll start with trips. Trips, pre-pandemic, were the foundation of most fundraising auctions. We're seeing that once again. People are eager to travel again. I wouldn't, I think you need to do a measurement or a gauge and figure out how much your people want to travel, how far they want to go. But if you're going to have, I think you can have an auction where the trips make up a quarter, a third of your lots. I have an auction I did just a couple of weeks ago, where trips made 70% of the auction. Their crowd likes to travel. They honor that and they put trips in. If you're going to do multiple trips in an auction, you need to make sure that there are a variety of the 3 Ds. You want a variety of distance, duration, and destination, right? So you want some trips that are a short drive, others that maybe they're a short flight, and maybe your crowd wants to go internationally. And in terms of duration, you got weekend, extended weekends, and full weeks. And it's easy to do some math on this. If you're going to Tahoe, you can go to Tahoe for 2 or 3 nights. You can go to Monterey for 2 or 3 nights and feel like that's a good trip. Hawaii, minimum 4 nights, right? It's a 4-hour flight. Somebody's going to go to Hawaii. They want to stay at least 4 nights. You go into Italy, it's got to be a week, right? And now, does that mean you can't have a week in Tahoe? No, sure, you can have a week in Tahoe, but you want a variety of distance and duration, and then also destination. So, some mountain, some beach, some city, just a little bit for everybody. So you've got what you can. And with trips, retail is what we predominantly see. And honestly, that works just fine. Obviously, you want the retail to be as desirable as possible. And no offense to Tom Burdett, but we'd never send somebody to stay in a Motel 6, right? If you have a trip to Kauai, stay at the Kiahuna Plantation Resort is great, right? It's retail. It's a fine place to go stay. A good hotel in New York City, fine. When we do get access for trips, usually it's in the form of access to a property you wouldn't otherwise be able to visit, right? Exclusive fractional ownership properties, for example. Occasionally we get to see experiences while on a trip. So if you've got a trip to New York City, chance to see Saturday Night Live, for example, or a chance to be in the crowd for Stephen Colbert, or to go to the Thanksgiving Day parade, or these types of experiences add to the trip. There are often relationships involved as well. Most of the time, these take the form of vacation homes owned by members of your community, a committee or board member's house in Tahoe, for example, Stinson Beach, Carmel, Hawaii. Sometimes you get trips that are based on the relationship, though. So, for example, Taste of Howell Mountain Vintners Association, Randy Dunn is pretty much they think of him as one of the founders of the Howell Mountain Vintners Howell Mountain appellation. And Randy did a lot for their auction a few years ago, where he's going to go whitewater river rafting with you. You're going to spend 3 days on the river with Randy, and that's as much about the trip. It's more about who you're doing the trip with than it is the trip, right? To go spend that much time with somebody who you admire. Nancy Oakes of Boulevard had a trip to the East Coast, where she was going to stay in a house across the street from you on the beach and come over and cook you dinner a couple of nights a week. And we're getting into dining and entertainment. I'm getting ahead of myself, but Cape Cod with Nancy Oakes is that's a big deal. Dining and entertainment have always been popular as long as I've been doing fundraising auctions. They have been great. People want to eat, they want to host their friends, and they want to get to know chefs and vintners. So if a dining and an entertainment lot is going to be straight retail, it has to have some sort of angle that makes it special. It's special enough to be in a live auction. I mean, you can always just have dining in your silent auction and it'll be fine. But a loan gift certificate for $100 to a local restaurant hopefully is nowhere near enough to be one of your live auction lots. But a collection of 12 gift certificates to 12 different restaurants and assembled into a calendar of dining or a year of dates transcends the value of the individual components, right? It makes the retail more accessible. I mean, it makes the retail sort of it does make it an access in a certain way. I've seen those you can up the ante on that even farther and actually print a calendar with each restaurant's a picture of the restaurant or their logo for each month, and then use that as marketing, not only to sell the auction lot that year, but then to go back to the restaurants and do look what we did kind of a thing, and use it as marketing for future auctions. But what people really want in dining and experience is access to either dining and entertainment is access to either an experience or a relationship. And so one of the examples that I use, and this is fresh on my mind because we just had it this last Sunday night, is dinner at Statebird Provisions that won the James Beard Award for Best New Chef in 2014. Dinner at Statebird's a great auction lot. Dinner for 4 people paired with wines does just fine in and of itself. To have it be a chef's tasting menu, right? Or to have Chef Stewart or Chef Nicole come to your table. Now we're starting to get up there. To have it be for more people, to have it be guaranteed reservations, so you don't have to worry about trying to make it happen. You just call in and they're like, "Oh, Jackie, so good to see you. Come on in. Yeah, you want next Tuesday? Easy, right?" But to have chef come to your house and prepare dinner is the pinnacle. Right. And Chef Stuart Brioza was on stage with me Sunday night, and this auction package sold for the most of anything at Meals on Wheels event in San Francisco on Sunday night. It could also be a relationship in the sense that it is somebody in your, and I talked about relationship and community, it could be a board member's house or a supporter's house, somebody in the community who has a nice house or is a renowned host or chef to host it, or has a house that people would like to go dine in. I've sold numerous auction lots where the package being sold was to go to, had one where the board was going to come to your house and cook dinner for you, right? Have the board, it's fun because you're putting the board to work for you for a change. It doesn't work if your board are the majority of your bidders, right? But, and to make that one work, you have to have at least one board member who really is a good cook. But even just hosting and having a chef come, the chef doesn't have to be well known for it to be a popular dining experience, for it to be perceived as access, right? Buy-ins and count me-ins. Buy-ins have been an integral part of our auction strategy since 2005, and they really started to become mainstream around 2012. And what they are is a buy-in is an experience that is sold on a per unit basis. It could be per person, it could be per couple, it could be per team. It could be something that is as straightforward as an Amazing Race scavenger hunt, or dinner for 10 couples in the museum with a chef and a vintner coming to prepare the meal and pair the wines. It could be as complicated as a weekend getaway to go bike riding around Lake Tahoe, or to come to San Francisco and spend the weekend getting insiders tours of museums with curators. All of which are examples that I've sold. In order for a buy-in to succeed, there are a few key components. It has to be on a fixed date. It needs wide appeal, and you need pre-committed attendees. And the fixed date part seems obvious, but I'll say it anyway. You simply can't try to coordinate a dinner for 20 people when every attendee has spent the same amount on the dinner, right? It's hard enough to coordinate dinner for 20 when one person has bought it, but when 20 people have bought it, it needs to they need to be in agreement before they buy it that this is the date it's happening. It needs to have a wide appeal. Something at the core of the experience has to be attractive enough to encourage people to want to do it with potential strangers. And pre-committed attendees. This is a social event and it needs social momentum. No one wants to spend $100 to $7,000 per spot to attend an event that no one else wants to go to, right? So make sure your buy-in has a few attendees lined up in advance so that when I say, okay, now who wants to go? It isn't, but like, oh, hey, Katie's in 1, 2, 3, and oh, Susie's in 4, 5, 6, right? A word about pricing. Pricing can either be fixed price or the price can increase, and it depends on the number of spots available. It depends on the size of your crowd, and it depends on their familiarity with buy-ins. If a buy-in, for example, is a 4th of July barbecue for 100 people, the price is going to be fixed because the amount of supply at that point is just, the number of spots available is so high that it's impossible to be able to, it's not impossible, but it's just challenging to drive that price up. But if there are fewer spots, with the maximum, say, being around 20 or 24, the price can go up. And the example I always use is dinner for 3 couples, because that's a real low number of spots available. And one of the first buy-ins I ever sold was dinner with the Toppins, Peggy and Tim Toppin. And Peggy makes a mean Coca-Cola braised beef, and Tim has an incredible wine cellar, and it was going to be on a fixed date, 3 couples, go join them for dinner. School auction community. So this is, it's not like Peggy and Tim are celebrities you should go try to track down. And say, okay, now who wants to go have dinner with Peggy and Tim? Oh, there's more than 3 hands in the air. Who wants to go at $150 per couple? There's still more than 3 hands in the air. So 175, 2, 250, 3, 350, 400, still more than 3, 455, 556, 650. There it is, 3 hands. Boom, 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 done, sold, 650 per couple. I've done that for as many as 50 spots in a 500-person auction where the price went from $150 to $675 per spot. Having that many spots is challenging to drive the price up, and your crowd really has to understand the process and get their hands in the air. The things that I like about buy-ins, Well, let me back up and say that if you're going to set a fixed price, you got to have the price set right, because it is you don't want to set the price so low that you sell out immediately, and then and there are still paddles in the air saying, oh, I wish I could have gone, I would have gone, right? Like it's better almost to sell 17 spots higher, knowing that you still have time after the auction to sell those unsold spots, than it is to sell out immediately and feel like you sold it for too little. I love buy-ins for a lot of reasons, but one of the main reasons is that they make an auction feel like it's more egalitarian without sacrificing earnings. The Boys and Girls Club of Sonoma do a lobster buy-in for 100 people, 100 spot lobster party for $175 a spot this year. That's easy math, right? That's $17,500. And I do, and Nelson Atkins just did a 20 spot exclusive 3-chef dinner at $5,000 a spot. That's $100,000, like that. And in each of these examples, the amount that the buy-in is being sold for is inexpensive compared to the rest of the auction. At the Boys and Girls Club, you're never going to play in the live auction for $175. You won't be able to buy anything for less than $2,000. At the Nelson Atkins, you're not going to be able to buy anything for less than $10,000. So to get something on the block that's like, oh, it seems cheap by comparison, it seems really expensive to be saying $175 a pop in this venue, like having a conversation on Zoom on 11 a.m. on Tuesday. But in person, after a few drinks, after other people have spent thousands of dollars, they seem inexpensive by comparison. And they're doing even better post-pandemic because people are really looking for ways to get together and hang out again. And the opportunity to attend another party or another gathering or another event or another experience is extremely enticing. And one of my final things I really love about buy-ins is that they give organizations an opportunity to market to a crowd another time in the year. And it doesn't mean that we do one event where a restaurant donates their entire seating one night, one seating goes to this particular auction, and we get a vintner to come pair their wines, and we sell spots at this seating at $150 per person. And the night of the event, the executive director just shows up and says, hey, everybody, we're so glad you're here to support the Humane Society of Southwest Washington. We hope you have a great time, enjoy your dinner, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon. Boom. It took what was a party, an auction lot, and just a little bit of marketing, a little reminder. And it isn't like you need to go bring a PowerPoint presentation and do a huge thing, but each one of these is a reminder of where they bought the lot and what cause they were supporting before they dive into the partying. Final thought on buy-ins before I move on. Should have made this one of the PowerPoint, should have put this on the slide as well. But one of the big keys is getting someone else to host it. If you're on the committee and you already have a full plate of stuff, get somebody to host it. When I talk about wide appeal, something at the core of the event that makes it enticing enough, get somebody who is popular, like somebody who A, is popular and be able to sell out, and B, will own it and run with it. The Boys and Girls Club did one event, and I hope Connie and Steve don't feel like I'm throwing them under the bus on this. Connie and Steve San Giacomo hosted a party at their vineyards in the summertime. And they opened up their vineyard, they got a live band, they got a couple of kegs of beer, and obviously they got a bunch of wine to pour. And then they invited food trucks to come where attendees could pay for their own food, right? So and I'm not in any way trying to denigrate the donation of Connie and Steve. I think it's genius because everybody's like, yeah, we want to go party with Connie and Steve. We sold 175 tickets at $150 a pop to go stand in line at a food truck and buy your own food, right? I mean, at its base, most denigrated version of it. At the high end, it's to go hang out with Connie and Steve and party and have a great time. But it underscores the fact that at its core, there is a host and hostess who are attractive enough to the crowd, who have enough cachet with the crowd for the crowd to want to go hang out and party with them. Next up are organization-specific lots. And these can be experiences or access that are unique to your organization. So name a baby hawk, for example. I work with the High Desert Museum of Bend, Oregon, and every year they have different animal that's been born or that they've just raised, that they've just rescued. And so they do, the best we ever did was name the baby hawk. Guaranteed parking, guaranteed schools always do well with guaranteed parking, principal for a day, overnight in the museum. In this case that's on screen, this one particular donor sells his socks every year. And you can see from the reactions of the crowd that people think it's hilarious and love it. And it's very organization specific. If we took his socks anywhere else, I guarantee you they would not sell for what they sell for, but he has cachet in their organization. Because they could also be access to celebrity within your organization. So dinner with the board or the headmaster or the auction chair. These are by definition access and or relationship. And it doesn't have to be within your organization to be about you. Worked with DeRosa for years, for example, and they would get, oh, sorry, dog just came in. Let me close this door. Hi, dog. Good to see you, buddy. These don't have to be about you specifically. I worked with DeRosa and Napa for years, and they had relationships with other museums where they could put together trips to go to New York City and get a behind the scenes tour of another museum. And that highlights, that makes DeRosa seem important by highlighting the relationships that they have, right? Sports and concerts. We are blessed to have great sports teams in the Bay Area, and they are perennially popular auction lots as long as they're doing well. If I had to rank the teams in terms of auction popularity, I would say the Warriors, the Niners, and the Giants are all extremely popular. Then the Sharks, and then the A's and Earthquakes. And I put the A's and Earthquakes at about the same level of popularity. If it's retail, it needs to be great. Seats behind home plate or on the 50-yard line, et cetera. And actually, these teams have gotten much better at putting together retail packages that seem like access. I actually had a retail package over the pandemic to go to the Warriors and sit at a table and have dinner served to you while you were watching a game. And it seemed like it was, you know, I mean, it was expensive to just go out and acquire these tickets, but they sold for 3-4 times what the organization paid for them. So again, if it's retail, it needs to be special. But with these sports, athletes and celebrity is literally, it's the definition of celebrity. So access or relationship are extremely valuable. A chance to sit in the dugout and get to chat with Gabe, the general manager of the Warriors, or to meet any of the, the general manager of the Giants, or meet any of the Warriors is gonna sell for absurd amounts of money. Wine and alcohol are quite literally the lubricant of many a fundraising auction. If your crowd knows it's wine, then wine lots do well, right? Like it's not, if your crowd knows it's wine and isn't in the heart of wine country, because wine auctions so often in wine country specifically are made successful by bidders from out of county. Wine auctions in county, it's not to say that they're not successful, but if you're going to do wine, then you've got to find an angle for wine that maps to your crowd's tastes, right? So so many times I've done auctions in St. Helena where it's a bunch of St. Helena wine and it doesn't do well. And it's like, yeah, no wonder. You're trying to sell grapes to the people who grow them, right? Like you need to get the people, if you're going to do wine, there has to be something to it that's either appealing to the people who live there or you're bringing something from out of town. Access to winemakers and building relationships with winemakers always do better than just straight wine. But it goes back to, every auction lot I can come back to, relationships are going to sell best. If you ask me, would I rather have a case of wine or a lunch with the vintner? I'll take the lunch with the vintner every time. Every time. Talk about warm-up lots, because these are also doing well post-pandemic. They were doing fine pre-pandemic, but I think they're important now because we know your crowd is going to be loud. We know that the first auction lot is going to be challenged. And I have always embraced the idea of, well, let's embrace the idea that if the first lot's going to be challenged and the crowd's not going to be paying a ton of attention, let's do something fun that'll hopefully be engaging and give everybody an opportunity to participate without necessarily sacrificing a lot. So here you see auction lot we had, they're good looking donuts, but it was a dozen donuts and a bottle of champagne to the winning bidder's table. And the idea had started as better dessert, right? But eventually just it became donuts, dozen donuts, and they're, some boutique donut place and, nice high-end champagne. And that, the goal isn't to say, oh, these donuts, they're worth much money. It's like, hey, we're here to have a good time. Let's not think logically. Let's just have a party at your table. The chilled magnum of champagne served immediately to the winning bidder's table has been a long-standing tradition at a number of auctions I do. And it's a tradition that's fine to borrow it. I don't think anybody, this is one of those ideas that moves its way around. I work with a school on the peninsula that's been doing this as long as I've been working with them. And at its worst, the chilled 2 bottles of champagne have sold for $900. At its best, they've gone for $2,000, right? And anytime you're selling a couple of magnums, a couple of bottles of champagne for $2,000, it's the opening auction lot, you're doing great. And one of my favorite things about it is that we start at a place where everybody can play. $100, $150, $250, whatever it is. You start at a place where everyone feels like they can participate. Everyone feels like they can play. And once you've raised your paddle in an auction, once you've committed in that way, it changes things. It makes the auction different. If the auction starts and the first lot, one of the best things I've seen happen is also the worst, where the first lot sold for $50,000. And immediately 80% of the crowd was like, wow, this auction's not for me. I'm never going to be able to play. And that might be the truth at every auction, but emotionally, you don't want that to be the truth for people. You want everyone to feel like they have an opportunity to participate, because then when you come back to doing the buy-ins and the count me-ins, they can. They said, and what are some other fun opening auction? Well, you see lots of organizations do the cake. Somebody bakes a cake and you auction it off. Whenever I'm working with a caterer, I like to give the caterer the opportunity to do a showcase dessert. So I could say everybody's going to get a good dessert. It's a fine dessert. Taste Catering does great desserts, but one lucky table gets this. The executive chef at the Palace Hotel in downtown San Francisco makes a mean croquembouche. I mean, like 3-foot tall croquembouche, a bunch of profiteroles all welded together with frosting, super stacked high. And he's so paranoid that it's going to fall over. He actually always makes 2. So it's nice because we can double the first lot. But we're saying everybody's going to get a fine dessert, but chef has made this just for you. And he wheels it out, and it gives him a chance to showcase his skills and be celebrity for a moment. And it gives us a chance to do something really fun. Which isn't to say go straight to the palace and ask for the croquembouche, but if he's still there and you're doing an event there, he probably will. But I've also found that just asking caterers in general isn't a put out for them. It gives them an opportunity to flex and to show off, to showcase skills that they often appreciate. And if they can't do it, they say, no, fine, we'll go get a dozen donuts. Making your funda needs successful. This is going to sound really familiar if you've ever worked with me or sat through one of these webinars before, but basically there are 7 keys to making a funda need successful, and they haven't changed. They have to, for starters, you need to have an honest need that is emotionally engaging, with a stretch goal, get a lead donor lined up in advance, quantify your ask in a way that personalizes it, and create a sense of urgency, and do some marketing in advance. So, sorry, I didn't mean to skip ahead. Let's talk about the honest need. It sounds really redundant to say it, but if you're asking for money, there needs to be a need there that your crowd can see and identify with, right? So be able to communicate what it is you want help doing in a way that then is also emotionally engaging. And this is often through testimonials, or through marketing in the catalog, or through putting together a video. But the Fund a Need is meant to be the emotional highlight of the auction that brings the crowd together and galvanizes them around supporting you and your cause. It is meant to be, a roller coaster of emotions. Hopefully they laugh, then they cry, then they give, right? And in that order, or maybe they just cry and then give. I'm fine with that being the roller coaster as well, but it needs to be emotionally engaging. It can't just be numbers. It can't just be expression of need. When it comes to setting your goal, I think it's always better to set the goal a little too high, but not so high that you can't achieve it. If the crowd exceeds the goal, then they feel good. That's fine. There's always messaging that can happen from the stage to the effect of, we set the goal and you've exceeded it, and that's great, but that doesn't mean the need doesn't exist, right? Lead donor lined up in advance. And this seems really obvious, but I would add to this, and this is important because you need to have somebody at one of the first two levels of your Fund a Need. And it doesn't have to be the top level. I used to think you could only open where you had somebody, but that's not my truth anymore, because I have since come to be way more comfortable with going out on a limb above and beyond where we know we have somebody lined up, as long as we can justify that ask. So we need to quantify the ask, right, in a way that personalizes it. And what I mean by that is it just makes each donation feel like they have an impact, right? So $10,000 could provide, 20,000 meals for Meals on Wheels, or $10,000 buys 2 chemotherapy chairs for the Cancer Treatment Center, or whatever the numbers are. But you have a lead donor, and if they're comfortable with it, if they aren't going to feel like you reaching above them is a personal affront to them, then I am comfortable having us say, tonight we're going to start that we've got a generous donor who's going to kick us off at $10,000 unless someone else wants to start us higher. Could be 20,000, could be 50,000, could be 100,000. You tell me. But if someone were to donate $20,000 tonight, we could do, and have it lined up as to what it is. And if nobody comes in and say, hey, great, it was a limb, you only get what you ask for. But I know now we start at $10,000 thanks to, Dave Johnson in 10, and as long as that person isn't upset by going over their head, going out on a limb has yielded interesting results. When it doesn't work, it's fine. We move on. And people just think like, oh, he tried. When it does work, it's phenomenal. I did a Fund a Need only event earlier this year where I said, we're going to start at $10,000. And I had a donor say, no. Like, I didn't even ask, said 50. I want to go 50. Great. Hey, more power to you. Right. So those moments happen. Those moments happen organically, but you can also manufacture them as well. You need to create a sense of urgency, right? You need for people to feel like something is not going to happen if they don't raise their paddle and support you. And Meals on Wheels in San Francisco does great work. They're fresh in my mind, so I'm going to stick with their examples because I'm always whatever's most recent stuff is there. But they do great work. Their waiting list is only 20 days. And in emergencies, that's 3 days. But with your donation tonight, you can reduce the number of days that someone has to go without food before they get off that waiting list, right? And 20 days is a long time to go. I mean, it's a short time in in their logistics, it's a short time, but it's still a long time to go without food. well marketed in the advance of your event. And what you don't want is for people to show up and go, oh, it's a fundraiser. Oh, we're raising money for this, right? So put your fund the need in the catalog, make it part of your marketing, let people know what they're going to be helping you raise money for. Have conversations with your donors. If you're not sure that you're on track and you're putting together the right fund the need, because sometimes you're trying to, sometimes it's obvious you raise money for this is what we do and this is what we need your money for. Sometimes there are specific things and you're not sure which one to focus on. Ask your donors. Ask the people who would be giving you the money. Not all of them, but a few of the key donors will help you figure out if you're on the right track for the fund the need that you're looking to do. And then in essence, it becomes marketing, because now, well, hey, would you support this? And be prepared to be surprised by what it is people are interested in helping you fund. I would say that post-pandemic, the fund the needs are doing exceptionally well. It seems as if people saved a bunch of money for 2 years and are now looking to spend it. And some of them want to spend it on auction lots, and some of them just want to give it to causes. And in each instance, happy to have both of them. But the what I said about at the onset about your crowd's going to be louder than ever, and they're going to be more philanthropic. They've been starving for in-person engagement. We are social beings who have tens of thousands of years of storytelling as part of the way that we exist and pass information on. We thrive on it. And people are really hungry, really eager to be back in a room and be emotionally engaged. And so if you do everything right and you get the crowd quieted down and give them a compelling reason to engage with you, the results thus far have been phenomenal. It's been really fun. Sometimes tear jerking. Saturday night was tear jerking, but in a good way, right? I mean, you tell stories of tragedy and then offer people an opportunity to ensure that no more tragedy occurs, and we're off and running. What talk about next? Let's talk about hybrid events. And there are a couple of different ways to do a hybrid event. And a hybrid event basically is an in-person event that is being broadcast to people on computers simultaneously. And there are a couple different ways to do it. Like at its simplest, you just connect the camera to the internet and you broadcast your event to people at home. And there are platforms designed to enable you to do this. ClickBid would be my first recommendation if you wanted to self-produce a hybrid event. Event.gives is in there as well. And the reason I like their platforms is that they enable you to stream directly to their platform. I'm going to start saying some gobbledygook here in just a second. I realize that. I apologize. But basically, they have a streaming codec built in that enables you to send a video signal directly from your computer to their platform, meaning that you have no delays in video. So that there's a 1 to 2 second delay versus sending it to YouTube, having YouTube send it back to the platform, and then having the platform serve it up to your people. And I did a hybrid event earlier this year that had 20-something seconds of delay. And at that point, you might as well be doing 2 different events, because there's no way to meaningfully engage people at the same time in the room and at home, and have them compete against one another in a live auction with a 20-second delay between when I say something and when people at home hear it. So if you're doing self-production, you manage the entire production, you play the videos, you show the slides, you cue the transitions, you manage all the bids. Again, all of this is feasible with the 2 platforms I named. They've basically built themselves to do this. It doesn't make it easy, and it doesn't mean it's not time consuming. This is an example of a hybrid event. One thing that I will say about hybrid events is that they give the at-home people a chance to engage in chat and participate. You just have to find a way to bring them into the conversation as well. Professional production for a hybrid event is where you have an AV company set up and film the event. They then are going to do all of the graphics and lower thirds and videos and all that sort of good stuff. And they edit and produce the show for you at that point. So what you're seeing here is the hybrid event that we did for Manhattan Beach Education Foundation last summer. So we had 4 tables in person and then a crowd watching at home that was professionally produced. You still need a bidding platform. You still need to have some way, and I would still recommend those platforms where you can self-produce, event.gives and ClickBid. I would just recommend having a professionally produced event set to those bidding platforms, because again, you're eliminating the lag. Let's see, Susie wants to know, can I weigh in on hosting an online auction that is closed live virtually? And an online auction that's closed live virtually is basically what all the virtual galas we were doing were for a year, right? I mean, it was those live auctions, the live auction that was coming that we were doing were online auctions that were closing at the end of their timing. And those work, they're fine. It just comes back to being a virtual event, right? Whether it's an online auction, whether it's a silent auction, whether it's a live auction, people wait until the last second to bid. And in each of those instances, you need to have a way to get your people at that moment prepared to participate. We found that extending the silent auction doesn't really help you raise more money. I like having an extended online silent auction leading up to an event, because you use it as a marketing platform to generate momentum and get people going. Hosting an online auction that is closed live virtually, I mean, I think it just faces all the challenge of virtual events. That's all. I mean, it's fun to do. Was there more to it than that? Because I feel like I'm spinning.
Oh, I know. I wasn't really clear. We used event.gives in December for our first ever online auction. It went really well for a first attempt, and we learned a lot. But your mention of it as a really great platform for hybrid just jogged a thought in my brain that maybe we should try to close it live. But we won't be in person in December. We're not going to be in person. We're doing, not to get too specific, but we're doing small, parties at board members' homes. We just had to cancel one on Saturday, mostly because of me, but also because of the host. So much for that, because this is what our donors said they wanted us to do. But we're looking to come back together in May of 2023 for a big in-person event. So it's just kind of getting to a year from now.
I don't think
how to plug in the gaps. So
given that context, I don't think the cost of producing an event to get people to watch to then close live is going to justify the results you'll get.
Okay, that helps.
Just to put it simply.
Yeah, we just did a lot of social media, building up to the close. And what you said, I think we knew going into it, people were going to wait till the last minute. And that's exactly what happened. So. Especially
since you're doing a bunch of now, on the flip side, I'm going to contradict everything I just said. If you're using event.gives, you could without making it a fully produced event, you could pretty easily set up, I'm going to contradict everything I just said. You could pretty easily set up a camera and a microphone and just be like, okay, here's the time when we're closing everything, and just work through, because you got to create some excitement. You got to get people there, and maybe that's what makes it. But I don't think the full blown production is necessary. I think it could feel, I think there's a way to do it without being full blown production, but still be fun. I realize it just contradicted everything, but if you're committed to doing the virtual and you're going to close it, then you might as well make it live in a way that's engaging. And it doesn't have to be any more engaging than what we're doing right now. When it comes to doing hybrids, one of the challenges you have to do is you have to manage the expectations of both crowds, right? And you need to let the in the room people know that you're going to be broadcasting and that they're part of the show that's going out. And at the same time, you need to let the at-home people know that they're watching a live show that is being sent to them. And you need to have a timeline in place that addresses the needs of the in-person crowd, because they're going to be louder than ever and they're going to want to party and they're going to want to hang out at their tables. And at the same time is true to the needs of your virtual crowd, because they're on a timeline. And if you say you're going to start at 7, then you better start at 7. You can't start at 7:20 because the caterer is running behind, right? And so you also need to create a system for proxy bidding. If you're doing a live auction in the room and people are going to be trying to bid from home, you can use certain bidding platforms. If you're using ClickBid or Event.Gives, then I'm comfortable with the low latency there of their ability to be able to do bidding in real time. However, if you're using any other bidding platform, and it's not the bidding platform necessarily, it's the latency in the video. So if you're sending it out to YouTube and having people bid on greater giving, there's going to be a 25-second delay between when things are happening on the, things are happening on the computer immediately. I'm seeing them happen on the computer immediately. I'm reacting to them immediately, but people aren't hearing that reaction for 20 seconds. And there is no way to do an auction with people in the room against people at home with that 20-second delay. So that's when we say, get a proxy bid. Just say, hey, if you can't be there in person, we appreciate your support. What auction lot are you interested in? How much are you willing to spend? And then just have somebody in the room bid on their behalf. Or worst case scenario, or not worst case scenario, but another scenario is just have somebody as the designated proxy phone bidder. Sun Valley Wine Auction last year did nothing online. There was no online bidding for their live auction, but there was bidding through their executive director. A few people had her number and she would call them, hey, your auction lot's up. And so you'd see her in the back of the room on the phone, like bidding on, in real time, just like the old wine auctions. It's not like this is not a new practice. We're not utilizing any new technology here. You need to make sure that your program, if you're doing a hybrid event, engages both audiences. And this kind of seems silly to say it, but really it's it's not just the program, it's the presentation. You need to make sure that you're not just talking to the people in the room the entire time, because then the people at home feel like you're just really not ignoring them, but focusing in on the crowd at home and making sure that there's engagement with them, but not spending all your time on them, so that the people in the room feel like, hey, why did we spend all the money to be here? And you're not taking care of us as well. So in presentation and in program, have ways to engage both audiences. I like miking the in-person crowd. Every AV company I talk about this with, they're like, oh my gosh, why would you ever do that? But one of the things I found is that the microphones you use for the virtual event, for the hybrid event, the sound doesn't get picked up beyond the stage. So I did an event that was a hybrid, and the crowd was loud, no surprise there. And me and the MC kept looking at each other like, wow, they're really loud. And boy, I hope everybody at home can hear this. Got back and watched the video later, watch what was, you couldn't hear the crowd at all. We thought they were overwhelmingly loud. And for the people watching at home, you could not hear them at all. And so I was like, oh, it would, like, there are instances where you would want the crowd noise to become audible. So I say mic the crowd, but Beth and all the AV guys say don't do that. Some other best practices: commit to your run of show, get all of your vendors who've agreed to do this to buy in advance. Have a contingency plan, because things are going to go haywire. And so if the caterer is running 15 minutes late, do you start the show before dinner is served? Because you can't afford to wait 20 minutes if you're going to have a hybrid crowd. And again, do I think hybrid events? Oh, wait. So if you're doing hybrid, got to make your event fun, right? use some new elements, do something to it that's going to be different, that's going to engage people. Maybe add some games. This was from a school event where you got to bid on certain teachers. You could go make donations in that teacher's name on their behalf, and whichever teacher won had to perform live karaoke, which was a fun touch. Utilize more entertainment. If you're doing a hybrid event, then you need to have, I think you need to have more engagement for the crowd at home, because otherwise they're just watching you do a gala. Right. And watching somebody do a gala, especially if it's got delays in the bidding and you can't participate, and all you can do is watch people speaking from the stage, and then watch an auctioneer do a fund a need, and then watch an auction you can't participate in. It's not a very engaging event. So have some more entertainment, and be open to changing. You never know what what you do or what you've done if you have a long-standing event is probably not going to be. And I would communicate with crowd, yes, but I would say even the bigger question is hybrid worth it? And the examples I've seen so far have led me to say that on the macro level, hybrids probably not yielding the results that you would hope for. I did an event in Florida in January, and one of their biggest donors is like, I'm not coming to the event. I don't want to be in a room full of that many people. So they did a hybrid event, and their in-person fund a need raised $550,000. And I'm not saying this to fundraising shame anybody, but just so we can compare the numbers. Their in-person fund a need did $550,000, and their virtual fund a need did 120, but 60,000 of that was pledged in advance. So the night of, their in-person fund a need did 60,000 compared to the 500,000 that their virtual that their in-person did. And that's 10%. It's hard to argue against that 10%, but that also is the best I've seen yet in terms of scale and in terms of percentages. And in terms of the amount of work that goes into these hybrid events, I haven't seen one yet that made me say, oh my gosh, we should do that every time. I'm waiting for it. I thought hybrid, I'll be honest, I was leading the charge. I was biggest cheerleader. I thought hybrid was going to be the thing when we first started exploring them. But given crowds' desire to be back in person, and given how much more money people are raising in person than online, it's really, really hard to say like, yeah, do the hybrid thing. That's the end of the presentation. I will stop the sharing and stop the recording.